Thank you so much, everyone, for coming out. I'm Marcus Weisgerber. I'm the editorial director at Defense One. I'm the global business editor as well. I write about the intersection of national security and business, so a lot of the defense industry. I also oversee our coverage of pretty much everything involving the defense industry, acquisition, budget, and whatnot. Thank you for coming out. Everyone got drinks and food. That is an excellent thing. We're going to hopefully try to have some fun, have a discussion here on stage, and include all of you in the process as well. So we're going to do about 30 minutes, and then we're going to open the floor up for questions, and then we're going to, I believe, have more networking and drinks and food afterward. And I think even somebody playing the piano. So with that, let me introduce our panel who has graciously joined us this evening. We have Luke Walter, who is the chief of AFWorks Insight Division, where he oversees the due diligence and provides insight to support the transition of dual-use technology to the Air Force. Is that kind of basic, general? Okay. And then afterwards we have Ian Aishin? Sorry, Ian and I just met 5 minutes ago. So a little behind the scenes. I am on paternity leave and I have not been working, and I just came back to work. So I have not prepped. We have prepped, some of us, in advance, not all of us. So we'll see what happens tonight. Somebody's got a drink up. I need the drink to put up with. There you go. Ian is with Ilaria. He is the director of a global public sector, and he has a background in intelligence and special operations, former Air Force. Great. Thanks for joining us. Really interesting company. I'm going to have them talk to us a little bit about it. I did not know about them. They're doing some really cool stuff. And then at the very end, we have Daniel Atea, Managing Director of RTX Ventures, the corporate venture capital arm of RTX, previously known as Raytheon Technologies, which, of course, has three businesses: Collins Aerospace, Pratt & Whitney, and Raytheon. Are we still allowed to call it Raytheon Technologies?
No.
No? Okay.
RTX, we rebranded a couple months ago.
All right. So as I mentioned, we're going to have a little bit of a discussion. I'm going to have each of the panelists kind of talk to us a little bit at the beginning of a little bit about what they do, and we'll dive into some deeper questions from there. So Luke, why don't we start with you? Go down the line. Tell us a little bit about what you're doing at AFWorks and a little bit of your background of how you actually have come to work there.
Absolutely. My name is Luke Walter. Work with AFWorks' Capital Initiatives Division. And we oversee our due diligence process, which reviews all new applications that are looking for SID rate setters through AFWorks. We also do data analytics, looking at our portfolio to make better, smarter investment decisions to help us decide which topics we want to reach out to, and then looking to expand access private capital into our portfolio company to help with those transitions of commercialization. I just joined the team in March, previously coming as a consultant doing CFIUS, Committee on Foreign Investment in U.S. work. Before that, working private sector consulting, tech, and finance. It had 7.5 years as a Marine intelligence officer.
Very cool. Ian.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you guys giving me the opportunity. So I retired from the Air Force last year. So right now I work at a company called Ilaria. It was a company that spun out of Google X in 2022. Basically, the mission of Ilaria is to take land, sea, air, and space and merge them together into self-healing mesh networks. And we actually just announced announcement this morning where we're partnering with Intelsat to build the world's first wholly optical network. And I say that's been my experience the last 11 months. Before that, my final 2 years on active duty was writing the emerging technology and AI strategy for General Brown. General Brown, the UK MOD, and the French Air Force all get together and build these strategies together to help inform and make sure they're going in the right direction. And so I think some of that may be helpful as we talk today. And then before that, spent a lot of time building multiple innovation labs, building the innovation career field, and a lot of the bringing in the companies on the other side, on the cyber side, for the user side, the base side, how do we solve problems? And so if there's anything we can help with that, I'd love to talk about that.
Great. Thank you. Dan.
Yep, great to be here. Thanks. I'm Dan Atea, lead RTX Ventures, which is the corporate venture capital arm of RTX Corporation. We invest in startup companies that have the potential to disrupt aerospace and defense. We invest in technology areas that are aligned to the critical and emerging technologies that are put out by the Department of Defense in the defense strategy, the National Defense Strategy. We've invested in 13 companies since we formed the group in March of 2022. So we're really active as a startup investor. Pleased to meet everybody here and happy to answer any questions.
Great. Thank you so much. So Luke, maybe we'll start with you. Talk to us a little bit about AFWorks and kind of, it's been on an evolution, and I suspect there's a lot of folks here, a mix of folks from primes, folks from the Air Force, folks from smaller type startups. Talk to us a little bit about the evolution maybe of AFWorks and kind of what your role is, I guess, in trying to do this due diligence effort.
Yeah, absolutely. I've actually met a few people here that are prior AFWorks alums, practically from the beginning. So might surprise them to realize I think the biggest difference is $1.3 billion worth of funding for cyber incident funds. I think that's our biggest value prop to many people in this room. And I think what really stands out about that is it's 1.3 of 1.9 billion that the DoD has. So 12 agencies within the DoD that do cyber incident, and AFWorks owns 1.3 to 1.9 billion. So please look at us as a partner as you move forward. I think one of the biggest things is the professionalization, and I think the focus on transition. And that is one of the things that I'm really focused on at the Capital Initiatives team is how do we add, that private sector thought process? How do we add that venture capitalism thought process to our portfolio? How do we make sense of our portfolio? How do we use market analysis to dictate what we should be investing in? How does it factor in, and how does it relate to the private capital markets? And how do we think like investors to make our portfolio more attractive to investors? Because as much as we do want to see transitions to phase threes, which are other government contracts using non-cyber funds, we also want to make sure our portfolio companies have the ability to gain access to commercial markets, because after all, it is supposed to be dual use technologies. And so I think that is one of the biggest changes in the AFWorks 3.0 that you might hear, is this increased focus on transition.
What does the Air Force get? I remember I'm trying to think of I know RTX Dan has invested in Hermeus. That's one of a hypersonic aircraft company that's looking to build commercial hypersonic planes and also military type hypersonic flying drones. I believe the Air Force invested in them as well. Like, so what happened? If the Air Force makes this investment, what is I guess what happens down the road? Do they get? I guess they get that stake of the company. Or how does that all work?
Yeah, the beauty is it's all non-dilutive, meaning we don't take an equity stake. So we are funding further research to help that company, but we don't take a stake out of it, which is great for follow-on rounds of investment because we aren't diluting their capital. And what we get out of it is, not only with the phase one, we get the white papers for phase twos, we get the prototypes, and then as we move through strat buy and tac buy to phase three, we're getting, operational capabilities. We're also providing the means for other program offices who have funds to access our portfolio at an instance, right? If you are a company that has been awarded a SIBR or a sitter, you don't have to go through the normal, POM cycle to get going. You're eligible to get contract money right away. And that is a really big initiative that if anyone out here has heard about the Ignite tool that we just launched, it is one of our big initiatives that we want to do is get the program offices who have money, requirements, and needs in touch with our portfolio company to get rapid acquisition, put them on contract. And so we get the ability to rapidly acquire, rapidly put on contract companies through our Cyber Sitter program.
I want to ask a similar question of Dan, but tell us a little bit maybe about Ignite. I know you and I talked about that when we were chatting last week.
Yeah, the Ignite tool is a marketplace that program offices can look up anyone in our entire Cyber and Sitter portfolio, and vice versa. If you are a small business that have been on an Air Force Cyber, you can gain access to it and start communicating directly with program offices. So if you're looking for a direct to phase two, if you're looking to transition from a phase two to a strat buy tac buy or phase three, you can start actively pitching, communicating with program offices to understand the requirements and get on contract. And so that has been launched by Mobilize, the same partners that did our Vision tool.
Okay. I know this probably isn't you, but I guess what is, if small business is talking to program office X, Y, Z, what is the hope, I guess, there? Is it that they could just, the program office could buy directly their technology? Is it to matchmake with a prime as well? If it's like, an aircraft, we're at an Air Force conference, let's talk about like an F-16, if like you want to add something on an F-16, some sort of EW or who knows what. How does that work?
Both are perfectly acceptable and desired outcomes. They have the eligibility to go directly with that small business, or they can be encouraged. Part of our StratFi requires matching to be a part of a broader program with the prime. So we encourage and are hopeful for both.
Dan, I referenced Hermes earlier. Tell us a little bit about the types of technologies and stuff that you're looking at kind of on a daily basis, or that, just on a quarterly basis, or however whatever type of time frame you're working on for RTX's portfolio.
Sure. So, like I said, we look very closely at the critical and emerging technologies list that's put out as part of the National Defense Strategy. There's about 14 to 17, depending on how you look at it, technologies that are critical to national security. And these include hypersonics, electrification, advanced propulsion, AI and ML, autonomy, advanced materials, advanced manufacturing. There's a variety of broad technology areas that we're actively looking at, and we've been investing in. That actually covers a lot of the types of investments that we've made in the first year and a half of our existence.
So tell me about I referenced Hermes earlier, and I know those guys, so that's why I'm kind of leaning on them a little bit. So what happens through your investment? Does Pratt & Whitney work with them on their engine that they're developing, or do you guys share engineering expertise with one another, or how does that relationship work?
So we're trying to support the innovation ecosystem and really help get new technology into the hands of the warfighter, ultimately solve our biggest, customer problems, or our customers' biggest problems, I should say. So when we make an investment, we're really just buying stock in the company, and we're, funding companies that show a lot of promise. But with that investment, we try to partner with them post-investment. So we don't put hooks into them. We're just buying stock, but then, we'll often be part of their board of directors, or, have some view through an observer seat. And then, we try to help them in any way that we can to be successful. So if they have a problem, with engineering, and they think that we might have some experts that could help, they call us, because, we're trying to support them to be successful. If they want to go to a customer together and they think we can help, they'll talk to us about that, and we'll try to help them get access to the right customer. Or in some cases, certain programs that are put together by the AFWorkses or the DIUs of the world, we might jointly support them, or write a letter of support, or show ways in which we can work together. And then specifically with Hermes, you mentioned Pratt & Whitney. After we invested, we helped facilitate a number of meetings between the Pratt engineering team and the engine team and Hermes, and they did actually select our F-100 military engine for one of their next generation drones that they're developing right now. So that's a positive outcome. Doesn't happen all the time, but I think, as Luke alluded to, we're very creative and open to different ways to work with these companies, and there are many types of wins that can emerge, after we invest in them.
Ian, you mentioned the fiber. Well, it's not fiber optic, optical. Free space. There we go. There's big emphasis on JADC2, basically connecting everything in the military. How can that type of technology, I guess, what are the benefits of that type of technology, and how close is this technology to being ready for prime time?
Yeah, so right now, with the Illyria's technology, and this isn't a sales pitch for Illyria at all, but our technology is TRL9 technology. And so, when we talk about JADC2, if you were in any of the briefings today where they mentioned JADC2, there's always this OB1 diagram. There's this big diagram with planes, ships, and satellites, and they all have lightning bolts. And everybody just assumes that those lightning bolts are this working combination of communication that just happens. The problem is each one of those aircraft and each one of those satellite buses and each one of those antennas is often a different proprietary technology by one of the primes or some other company, or some bespoke protected waveform. So there's difficulty connecting all of those together. And so what we've been working on for a long time is an open source standard for communication to ensure that any Prime X, their proprietary waveform can then connect to them. But at a certain point, it can be translated to someone else's waveform. And at a certain point, it can move into Link 16 and then LTE and then 5G. And by doing this, we create this self-healing mesh network of different nodes, all with different communication payloads and different communication paradigms, so that we can move around in any sort of environment. People forget also that on that OB1 diagram with those lightning bolts, there's also weather. There's physics and there's weather and there's different issues in between. And just because you have B-band doesn't mean that the moisture in the air is going to allow that to happen. And so you need something that can maneuver that network and maneuver that data around. And we think a open source, non-proprietary solution, one that's actually on GitHub and anybody can go and download it to make sure that we can all connect to a common control plane, we think that's vital. And so that's what we've been working on. And the other side of that is optical communication, actually pushing photons through free space. And by free space, I mean there's no wire in the middle of it. So from me to you, from me to an aircraft. But how do we push high bandwidth communication? And that's something we've been doing. Our team, when they were inside of Google and Lincoln National Laboratory, was doing for decades, but pushing at hundreds of gigabits a second through free space, up to 70,000 feet on a U2, or across a river, or maybe there's an island that only has a few cables that connect all of its internet. And if that were to go down, it would need some sort of backhaul and some sort of other capability. And so those are things we've been doing not only for the government, for commercial industry.
So where's the technology now? Is it this something that can be done today, or is this something that's 3 years, 5 years?
So our software, the one that links all this together, is TRL9. It was part of the software that linked to Google Loon, to Google Aircraft, to Google Ground millimeter wave mesh. And again, they had a ground, an air, and a space issue. They were trying to connect all those domains. And so it's been TRL for a long time, and we've been doing this with the Navy, the Air Force, Space Force, and with Intelsat and a lot of space networks as well. And then if you look at our free space optical communication payload, you can go to our lab at Livermore right now, and you can see a 100 gigabit link between us and a mountain about 60 miles away. It's every day, all day, and has been for about 5 or 6 years. And so those are ways that we're trying to help, again, the government and commercial industry move forward. I would want to jump on, you'd asked about AppWorks, and one of the great things about it, well, why would they put this much money, and what is the value of that cyber money and that 1.3 and all the way up to $1.9 billion? And one of the things that's really nice is the government only has so many ways that it can signal industry to say this is important to us. Other than EQTEL, it can't take an equity stake. EQTEL can take about a 3 to 3.5% stake. But they can say this is important to us. Not only are we going to put some non-dilutive funding, but we're going to give that signal to VCs and to the rest of the world and to other customers to say we are interested in this. And so what ends up happening is for every dollar of R&D spent that DoD uses, it then signals RTX and the other VCs in the world and other investors out there to also spend money, because we're all going after the same thing. And then everybody benefits from that development. Even if it's something that the military won't buy in the end, there is a thing called the Defense Industrial Base, and the strength of that is just one of the indicators of the strength of the nation. And so it's a way that the Air Force can use the few tools that it has, or different tools that it has, to help this big ecosystem of startups.
I didn't plan to ask this question at all, but being that Google spun you guys out, Dan, you're based in San Francisco. For I guess 10 years now, we've been talking about the relationship between commercial tech and the Defense Department. It seems to me, as just kind of an observer of all this, there have been there's a lot. There are those companies that definitely do want to participate and work more closely with DoD. I think we have this Silicon Valley Defense Group that's been formed. That's got a ton of different companies. But I guess just as kind of observers yourselves, I guess how are you viewing tech relations between commercial and defense right now?
I think personally, it's really gaining a lot of traction and speed. Both companies are more interested to try to serve the defense mission these days than over the last 10 years, I'd say. It's really ramping. And you're seeing venture capital funding flow in as well. So the successes of companies like SpaceX and Anduril are showing investors that, there is an end customer, there are contracts. To Ian's point, a lot of these programs like AFWorks now, with the budget that they have, this is, a way for investors and the startups themselves to get, end market, product market fit, and understand that there's customer interest for these activities, and that there are potential contracts down the line that these, emerging startups can help solve. And that attracts investors, that attracts great employees to these types of things. And, I really think it's gaining a lot of steam.
I think one of the things, a byproduct of what's happening in the Ukraine is actually there's more money that's going in. The amount of venture capital and private, we'll call it PE firms, further down the investment chain that have decided that at some point they need to at least rethink their investment thesis and decide whether they're going to use defense as part of that. I've seen a few companies and a few firms move into more of an ESG mindset. It's kind of, I'm gonna put this much money towards commercial, but at the same time, I need to do something else, and whether that's sustainability or environmental investment. I'm gonna use some patient capital, meaning maybe I don't look for my 3x to 10x return. Maybe I'm okay with a little bit better than market rate return because I'm doing some good in the world. And so the family offices, the PE, and the VC firms that have moved towards that, it's really beneficial to see that happening. And then we're also seeing companies that are being very deliberate about it. As we've had more companies realize what it takes to get into defense, they realize that there are certain times in a company's lifespan where defense is right. Getting a great R&D contract for a shipper is amazing. It's not something that you should go out and change your pitch deck to say, I've got this much more ARR and completely change your headcount because of it. That is non-dilutive funding that comes in to help you out. Maybe it takes a feature that was further down on your pipeline and it moves it to the front because you have a paying customer that wants to test it. But the moment that you start to say, now that means I'm going to get a phase 3 and then attacked by a program of record, the statistics are not in your favor. But if you look at it as a way to validate your tech, to actually get some government R&D behind it and learn things that you wouldn't learn otherwise, then it's an amazing opportunity. So I think educating customers and educating startups from very early stages of what that means, so they can make better decisions as a C-suite, I think is vitally important.
Yes, Luke, do you have any just thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's a really good point too, is, the cost of money right now is much higher. And government contracts, once you get them, can be very lucrative and very long-term and can really kind of give you a guaranteed recurring annual revenue that is extremely attractive. So capturing the government contract can result in a very large amount of revenue that you can forecast well into the future to really help yourself grow. So while, the percentage of transitions may be smaller than what people might like to see, you're early stage, it helps with the R&D, but the payoff can be really beneficial, especially when it's costing 7% to get money to try to invest elsewhere.
We're going to go to questions in the room in about 5 minutes or so, but I wanted to ask Dan and Ian, kind of as the non-government folks on the stage, what are you guys making of numerous efforts over the years by DoD for these innovation type projects and efforts and whatnot?
So I think it's a really important stepping stone and set of tools to really pull new advanced technologies, disruptive technologies into the DoD, get it into the hands of the warfighter. I think, as these gentlemen have kind of described, some of the earlier, smaller contracts, they don't have a ton of significance, but they are that stepping stone to start to get a startup on track, to demonstrate their technology, to get non-dilutive funding to do so, but then ultimately to get that kind of connection to a potential program that actually can deliver the meaningful revenue in the future. And that's really what attracts investors to the table. So I look at these, DoD innovation programs as really essential stepping stones for an early stage company. And we need them and we need support for them.
I think I get to be in a unique position. So I was active duty at the beginning of DIU 1.0. I was an advisor for DIU 2.0. I worked at InQtel for a little while, and then I got to help AppWorks 1.0 and 2.0. And now I've retired. I'm on the commercial side, and I get to be a beneficiary of DIU 3.0 and AppWorks 3.0. Really, all of these innovation organizations take the same shape. At the very beginning, they go, we need to fix things. We have a lot of problems. They get some money, and they go out and they just try a bunch of stuff. Some of it works well, and some of it doesn't. And that's anything that you try is going to be that way. After they look at it, and this is where we get from the 1.0 to 2.0, they realize that it's really hard to transition without a customer on the other side. If I don't have a plan for commercialization from the very beginning, if I don't do enough due diligence on my startup as I go through it. And so I use those lessons learned to do better with my scouting and my filtering and my pipeline. And so 2.0 was a much better version of that. And then 3.0 on both of the organizations is actually really nice because they tied it to the National Defense Strategy. Now the DIU rests securely under the Secretary of Defense, and AFWERX is in a very secure position as they've gone through this for multiple years. They say, this is the national security strategy, this is the national defense strategy, this is the SecAF's vision for AFWERX, and then for DIU, this is what the Secretary of Defense wants. And so now they not only can align their technologies and the startups for what investors want and what the VCs are looking for and what commercial markets are looking for, but they can also align it to real strategy documents that actually come out of HASC and SASC and actually work towards National Defense Authorization Act, and all of the language that they're going to need to gain appropriation so they can actually make this through. And because of that, you've seen a much higher success rate because the shots on goal are a little bit lower, but they're taking the time to get the right shots. And so from the commercial side, we've been a huge beneficiary of DIU and some of their contracting mechanisms. I think one of the greatest things is now they can give out 254s. So this is the form that startups need to try to get security clearances. You guys have all looked at SAM.gov and realized that, if you don't have a security clearance when the time of award or a time of proposal, you're out of luck on very certain, very specific opportunities. But now if DIU can host it, if ARL can host your clearance, it opens up an entirely new door of not only understanding of what the customer needs, but acquisition, and it lowers the barrier to entry to getting funds and actually solving problems. And so each one of these phases, these innovation organizations have just gotten more robust. They've gotten better at what they do, and then we'll see what happens in 4.0 if that ever becomes a thing.
Well, we just started 3.0, so let's not talk 4.0. But I appreciate the advertising coming from the left side because that focus on having a military end user at the end is something that I think many have eluded organizations prior to. And they're just focused on cool tech to the combatant commanders and forgetting who the end user is. But you can see that, in our latest announcements and our specific topics that we have announced, while they are very specific, they generally want to computing, sensors, advanced robotics, machine learning, all things that tie into the OSD's critical technologies list. Yep. Our Spark team that does the Collider events, the one that they just started redoing them or reactivating them at Supernova, tied around the operational imperatives that the Secretary of Air Force has on resilient basing, this last one. So tying those into operational needs that the end user, the combatant commanders, the program officers can understand and some value in, has been a really important part of AFWERX 3.0, and I think of the large DoDX ecosystem.
Yeah.
Audience, who has a question? Right. We're going to run you a microphone. Hold on one second. I got to give up mine.
Hi, Cam Rogers from Leidos. My question is for Ian on your free space optics that you've been working on over the last several decades, along with Lincoln Labs and others. Is that technology able to, again, reach down to the ground? Yeah, thanks, guys. I got to use my voice here. But can you do laser to ground comms? And is that what you're looking at?
Yeah, so one of the interesting things, so everybody knows about this project in Google called Terra. It was a non-coherent light, so on-off keying. So basically you take light and you flash it Morse code really fast. It's called on-off keying, and that's the way you encode the light in ones and zeros. What ends up happening is as you get distance, and what he's referencing is as you get to a certain distance, it's really hard to see. It's almost like when you look and you see a mirage. It's really hard to see if that light turned off, or if I just didn't see it, or there was some turbulence in the air. And so range is difficult in atmosphere, and this is why most of the spacecraft use on-off keying, because it's in the vacuum of space, it's cold, it's no big deal. When you get down to atmosphere, it's difficult. And so we went ahead at completely different. We're a coherent light solution, meaning we're actually using a laser itself, and we've encoded the lambda, the laser
colors.
Yep. So, and we're doing this through atmosphere at anywhere from 60 to 80 miles at 100 gigabits and up. And we've been doing that for many years at aircraft, moving ground vehicles, all of that. And so we think that's a very important technology for the government moving forward.
As you deploy that, are you looking at 1550 as your standard, or you're using European standards for?
So you can use lots of different lasers. It all depends on what your amplitude is going to be and what your swap looks like. And it looks, depending on what your range is going to be. But yeah, we're agnostic. We can use whatever you want.
And last question, are you using, I guess you would call it proliferated architecture for ground to actually receive those signals across the globe in CFLOS, at least to avoid cloud-free line of sight?
So we're doing multiple things because there's already a pretty nice free space optical network that exists out there in space, but it uses other people's proprietary solutions. And so being able to take advantage of their modems and their solutions and partner with other companies. But then we're limited on speed. So when you start looking at what we're doing, we can go at a much faster rate, but we can still take advantage of stuff that's already proliferated. Thank you.
Thanks. I'm Paula Trimble. I work for the Space Development Agency. I also handle our small business, but I had a question related to Ignite and trying to better understand how that works for a program office, because that assumes that you have the ability to change what you're doing with your money in the year of execution. So I was hoping you could talk a little bit about how does it work if you want to get in on something that has been funded through a SBIR and you're a program office, if you can't necessarily redirect your funds in that year. Some companies can't wait 2 years to get on contract. So I'm interested in that. And then the other thing was I kind of wanted your perspective. Do you think we're at a point where we need to raise or push to have the caps raised on phase 1 and phase 2 SBIR and SITR contracts? And would that be beneficial to increasing transition of those technologies into programs?
I'll address the second one first. I'm trying to make sure I don't create Colosseum out here. But I can definitely understand the position of needing to raise SBIR and SITR funds specifically for phase 2s and phase 2 plus. Right? A phase 1 white paper, we can have that discussion. But we completely understand that there are different capital requirements for certain technologies. If you're trying to address a SpaceX need on orbit, objects service, that probably has a higher cost to develop and implement than, making a comms network on the ground, right? So I think that is a very smart question and something that we certainly should be looking into. I have my legislative team here to be able to tell you if that is trying to work its way into the NDAA, but it is certainly a discussion that we are having internally and a topic that we are aware of. So thank you for bringing that up. But I think it's an incredibly smart question. I'm happy to engage with you afterwards to see how far along we are on that. For the Ignite tool, we just launched this at Fed Supernova, and anyone who has ever been in product development, product launch understands that, the way ahead will be a little bit bumpy, and we are looking to find all the bugs, create the best user experience we possibly can. But essentially it is a marketplace. And so your comment about shifting funds mid-year, I don't know if that is necessarily the intent of the tool to understand how to implement that. We kind of hoping the program offices would understand how and when to use their funds, but it's a matchmaking tool in which communications engage between the small business and program offices. We have really big hopes for this, and I don't want to overpromise what we can do here, but there is potential to match requirement development using, generative AI or large language models to read abstract data, right? And be like, oh, this is a match for what you're saying you need to have, without anybody saying, without you communicating to that company directly. It's a search function almost, right? So there's really interesting things that we want to do with this. I don't want to call it a marketplace because I think people have been burned so much with this idea of ecosystem marketplaces, but it is a place for small businesses to register, PEOs, program offices who have the means and funds to put them on contract to communicate and get the ball rolling beyond the launch cycle and the generally longer acquisition cycle. We have big hopes for it. Please stay tuned as we keep working that out.
Love the panel so far, fantastic. My name is Gurut Acharya. I work in defense tech, venture capital, space defense, and advanced manufacturing, early stage. Question that I have is, what we've seen is kind of like the valley of death and being able to traverse, let's say, getting DIU, AFWorks, any of these R&D elements of the federal government, initial money to come up with, early proof of concept. But going from Series A to more of a growth play, the ability to get a program of record remains quite elusive for many companies. So I spent some time at DoD down at Fort Belvoir, and what I saw was education of what's really going on in Silicon Valley, Austin, Texas, LA is not really proliferated much into much of the Beltway culture or other entities unless you're in a tip of the spear R&D-esque realm. So with respect to the R&D units, how do you bolster communication to your GS13, GS15 level program managers, procurement officers, so that they know that there are alternatives or other exciting opportunities for advanced technology that they can incorporate?
I love this question because the valley of death is a hard thing. But I think one of the interesting things is on the venture capital side, no one goes to a seed fund and asks for a $50 million check because they know that a seed fund doesn't do $50 million checks. They know that seed funds do much smaller checks. Maybe it's a $3 million at a 15 post, and that's the standard check size. This is what they're looking for. But the face of the company, what they really need is a Series D because they've got a productized thing. They've got a commercial product. They're actually bringing in revenue. They have a way forward. Maybe they're in a growth stage. It's very well laid out. The Air Force funding is very similar. SIPRs are not Series D. They never have been. Now you can get lucky and maybe you move into a phase 3, you move into attack by stratfi. But by the way, if you look at the big darling of government is SpaceX, and I mean that in the sense of if everybody looks at SpaceX, it was an idea, it then was funded, it's now worth I think $100 billion or something crazy. But if you look at how many contracts they had on day 1 and day 10 and year 1, it wasn't a SIPR. They do have SIPRs. I think they had 1 or 2, but they also had other programs. They had other R&D funding. They had 6 or 7 products that they were using and getting funding for because not all of them are going to work. Some of those are going to hit the valley of death. Some of those, we were going to hit a CR in the government. At some point, the commander was going to change out and the new commander was going to move in a different direction. And in order to add resiliency to their pipeline, they were able to take on multiple forms of revenue while they waited for those higher levels. And so I think being very deliberate about where SIPR fits in a company's life cycle and what point they actually start writing real white papers and answering RFPs and answering RFIs. Because if you wait until your SIPR phase 2 ends and then you go, oh my gosh, I didn't get attacked by stratfi, and then you decide to start answering your first white paper or RFI, now you're 2 years out from any real revenue. And so you have to do those things at the same time. You have to be very deliberate about your BD and capture strategy and understand where the money comes from, where it exists, where Replicator now exists in the entire ecosystem, but know it as well as you know where you're going for your seed fund, where you're going for Series A and B, what you're going to try to get from those funds and which are the right funds to use. Because we spend a lot of time from the commercial side, people spend a lot of time on that side understanding it so they know who they can talk to. They don't do as much time, or it's harder because it's more of a black box with the government, but there is information out there. It's just, we have to know that not all funds are created equal to fix a few of the valleys. They'll still exist even if you do it right, but we can fix a few, I think, that way.
All right, time for 1 or 2 more.
All right, I'm going to give you guys a softball. If we think about the RFP process and we go to the left before the RFP is released, a lot of innovation could take place if we really understood the customer requirements. You guys talked about requirements. We in the Air Force generally do a lousy job of writing requirements. We get a product that says, well, this isn't quite what we wanted, but we can make do, okay? So my contention is if we would work with the customer or the customer would work with industry before RFP release, a lot of innovation could take place. We might not have to buy something. We could do it a different way, or if we had to buy it, we would have better, more defined requirements. How do we make that happen?
Yeah, definitely. No. I think that's the holy grail, but I would like to hear Luke's comments on this.
No, I mean, that's a problem, and it's a problem at scale in data, right? So I swear this is not supposed to be a pitch or ignite, but one of the points of that is before you're writing an RFP, as you're developing your requirements, look at our SIPR portfolio, what's already available that you can put straight to a phase 3. That is something that we hope that the program officers or anybody that has these kind of requirements looks at. We're working, we have a company on SIPR who is helping automate market industry analysis. So as you're writing your RFPs and you're looking at the market analysis, it's showing you not only what the market's saying about it, about the feasibility of this technology area, the academic and leading research on it, but here's also our sister companies that are already addressing this. And so, for that, I mean, that is a tool that's already there. So if you have requirements, just look through our portfolio, you might be able to address it immediately and put them right on the contract. The other one would be participation into our solicitation cycle, our specific topics. We don't come up with those. Those are topics that the end users, the military end users, need to give to us. And we have admittedly had, during some of our cycles, participation levels vary. And so, if you want to get something on SIBR without going through the full contract to see if it works, you get a prototype going or even a white paper, participation in our specific topic selection process is key. So if you're not participating, your topics aren't going to be selected and pitched. So those are two of the areas that I would encourage anybody who's building requirements in the Air Force to do. Get with our selection or specific topic selection and use our Ignite tool. And then I do want to use this as an opportunity to pitch for outside investors. Our portfolio is public. Yes, the SDA data is poorly managed, but if you go to afworks.com and you go to the AF Ventures division, we have the dashboard with every one of our awards that you can search to find.
Yeah, I just want to add to that. I think that there are so many DoD innovation groups. The more engagement between the end user and the program offices with those groups, the more fruitful those programs will be. So I don't know the answer to your question, but if we can encourage that, we're going to get a higher yield of transitions from the companies engaging with those DoD innovation groups.
So I got one for the government and one for the commercial side. So for the government, there are some offices out there that have been amazing in the last 12 months with commercial engagement. Industry day after industry day, they read the white paper, they call you up and they ask questions, they want follow-on meetings, and then they bring everybody out and they talk to them for 2 days and they say, we're interested in this is our problem, teach us what you do. And they bring 20 companies in to do that. And every company gets to pitch and gets their own time, and then the companies get to come together, a team, and figure out how to solve that problem as a team. And so it becomes a group of people all trying to solve the same problem. And even though, your company may not get selected, you're at least there. You have a better understanding, and then maybe you realize it's not for you. But now it's transparent. And so the most transparent and the more transparent government can be, the better. There's even been some of the units that will actually go in and they'll read everybody into the program, let you learn, and then read you out so you can see, is your technology correct? And I think that's an amazing way to approach the companies. From the commercial side, it's a hard decision to say, I'm going to write a 10-page white paper and never see any revenue from that. That takes time. It takes technical writing, it takes my engineering's time, it takes my capture manager's time, but it takes time. And so you as a company, as a C-suite, have to make that investment and then decide, am I going to make that an investment? Am I going to help use my writing, because they're going to read it, to help guide acquisition strategy, to guide their technical strategy? It doesn't always work, so it's really hard to say whether it was time well spent or not. But if you don't do it, then you'll never be able to talk to go. And so it's hard to figure out, is it worth the time to come to this event? Is it worth the time to come to AFA and to talk? But at some point, you have some sort of spend on marketing and on interaction with the customer. And that's some of the ways that you can do it. And you can do it from home because you submit it and then you're done. It's just really hard to figure out ROI. But both of those things have to happen. And if we increase those, and then we slowly merge that seam between government and commercial, and we can build much better things.
All right. Final question. Do any of you play the piano?
No, very bad.
I tried. All right. I want to thank everybody for coming out tonight. We really appreciate you all coming. I want to thank our sponsors, Pluralsight, AWS, and Leidos. Thank you. And we look forward to you sticking around for drinks and for more food and networking. So thanks so much. And join me in thanking everybody. One more. Luke wants the last word.
We do have specific topic and open topics open right now. So if you're a company who's looking for SIVers with the Air Force, we have solicitation cycles open right now that close at the end of the month. So please, if you're looking for funding, we're taking callers.
There you go. Thanks so much.